Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev and devnursery.com. And in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a full CRUD Express EJS app using JSON files as a database. So that's right, I'm not going to be using actually like a third-party database. We're literally just going to write the data to JSON files and read it from JSON files. So this will be sort of an interesting experiment, okay? And sort of kind of, yeah, working with files. So here we go. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this template that I've created for EJS templates. Okay, so you can find it on GitHub. There's the URL, there's the repo name. Okay, I'll put a link to it in the video description. But again, I can just create a new repo from this template by clicking create a new repository. And we'll just call this EJS Express JSON CRUD. Okay, and I'll hit create repository. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone this repo down. So I'm going to click code. And there we go. And I will do git clone. There, like that. And then I'm going to open up this folder in VS Code. So I'm going to hit open folder and go into, what did I just call this folder? JSON file. That's the name of the folder. So JSON file. There's the folder with our clone. Cool. Okay. And then from this folder, what I'm going to do is open up a new terminal. And I need to install my dependencies because this template already has all the dependencies I should need. So I can just do npm install and let it install my packages. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to be building essentially is just a basic app that should be able to CRUD, let's say, to-dos, but it'll do it via JSON file. So it'll actually be able to persist the data without me having to get some third-party database, without me having to like learn SQL. It'll all be pure JavaScript using JSON files. Okay, so let's see how we will do that. So of course we're going to need our models folder. So I'm going to create a models folder because generally anything data-wise is going to be done in the models folder. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file called to-do. Okay, todo.js. And basically we need a couple different things. We need to basically, let me think about how I want to do this. I'm going to create a class that when the class gets initiated or constructed, that it's going to double check to make sure that the JSON file exists. If not, it'll create it. And then it's going to have several methods for reading and writing to that JSON file of a list of to-dos. Okay, so that'll be sort of the way this is going to work. So in this case, we're going to create a class, and we're going to call this to-do, because generally models are given a name like that, a capitalized singular name, and then here's our class definition. Okay, so the idea is that whenever I create a to-do object, I want it to do some stuff right away. So it's going to be inside of our constructor function, which I don't think we'll need to take any arguments, so that should be fine. And what we need to do is first check to see, hey, does the JSON file exist? Okay, so for that, we're going to want the file exist function. So here's the documentation for the file system part of Node, which I should probably import. So const fs equals require fs. Okay, cool. File exists, file exists. It does exist. Copy file fs shown, chmod. There's a bunch of functions for working with files. They're pretty useful. Like I can make folders. A lot of these things we will use throughout this, but I just want to find the function for whether a file exists. I can just use Control F Okay, must be in a different library. So let me do that. Let's go here. Node function for file exists. There we go. FS. Okay, it is part of FS. Exists sync. And I think you just passed the file name for him, right? Yep. foo.txt. Okay. And it's going to check in the folder that you're in, which would be this todo.js. So basically the idea here, we first check if fs, and basically we'll really care if it doesn't exist. So if fs.existSync, and we're going to just say todo.json, then we'll do something. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to want to write the JSON file. Okay, so then it would be fs.write. Write file. Okay, and then again, this function takes an argument of where the file is you're writing to and what you're writing to it. So in this case, if the file doesn't exist, then what I want to do is just load it with a empty. Oh no, first the file will be todo.json, and it'll be just filled with an empty object. Okay. Cool. Else, then what I want to do is, like, if the file does exist, and actually the other thing I want to do is say this.data equals an empty object. So that way the idea is to keep the data that I have in memory. There's a copy of data that I have in memory while my application is running, and I want to keep it in sync with the file. So that way every time I load up my app, it'll read the file and stay where it left off. But I don't want to be like reading the file constantly. I want to work off memory because it'll be faster. Okay, so this.data. So that means, hey, I'm running the app for the first time. It's created the file. Wonderful. Now on future iterations, then what I want to do is read the file. Okay, so we'll say const data, const data equals fs.read file. And the file I would want to read is the todo.json. Okay, and then that data is just going to be a string. And I'm assuming it's going to be a JSON string, so I want to parse that string. JSON.parse. And what this is going to do is I read the file. I'm going to pass the contents of the file, which should be a JSON string, to JSON.parse. And then this should just be my data. Okay, and then I can just say this.data equals the data. So essentially, whenever I create a to-do object, this is what's going to happen right away. Because again, a constructor essentially is just a function that just happens right away when you create that object of that class. Okay, so wonderful. Okay, so in that case, now the data property should always be in sync. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create some utility functions for certain logic I'm going to be doing a lot, like basically writing. Okay, so we'll make a function called write data. Okay, and all this is going to do is that anytime I call write data, it's going to rewrite the file. So it'll be fs dot write file. Okay, write file. And what do I want to write? todo.json. And what I want to write to it is json.stringify. So basically the idea is I want to write a JSON string to it. And the JSON string should be of this.data. Okay, so essentially that is how I would update the file whenever I need to. Cool. And cool. So now what I want to do is be able to read to-dos. So I'm going to just create the functions I need to CRUD the to-dos. So actually, I'm going to write a function called getAll. That'll give me all the to-dos. Okay, which I'm going to assume is in an array. And actually, on that note, what I should also do here is that this .data .todos equals an empty array. Okay. Oh wait, no, not there. Control X, we do it when it's a fresh thing. Or actually, yeah. And then this should start off as to-dos. Actually, it would be easier if I just do this. To-dos, which is an empty array. And then let's just JSON stringify that. And again, JSON.stringify will take a JavaScript object or an array and turn it into a JSON string. Okay, so essentially what's going to happen is that anytime I want to get all the to-dos, it should just return this .data .todos. Okay, so that's simple. Okay, now I'm going to say get one. So I only want to get a particular one. This should take, let's say, an ID. Okay, we'll give them an ID number. Okay. Which makes me realize I probably also want to set up a, yeah, set up a this dot, let me think about how I want to do that. This, oh, I know how I want to do it. Okay, so this dot highest ID or high ID. Now the reason I'm tracking this is that way when I assign an ID for the next to do, I make sure that I assign them the next number in the chain. Like a normal database would always assign like ID 1, ID 2, ID 3. I want to make sure I do that too. So I need to know what is the highest ID currently in my database. Okay, so essentially, if there is nothing, so if this dot data dot to-dos dot length is 0, okay, if that's true, then I would like it to be 0. Okay, we're just going to start, or actually with 1. Oh, no, 0 is right. Cool. Then, if that is not the case, that means there is something in the array. Okay, there is something in the array. So in that case, then what I want to do is use the ID of the last thing in the array. So I'm going to say this dot data dot to-dos. Then there's an at function. Well, actually, I'll just do it this way. I'll do it the old-fashioned way. Using the index that is the array's length, this dot data dot to-dos. Dot length minus 1. Because that would be the last item in the array. And then that item, I would want to use its ID property. And that would be the highest number. Okay, so that'll make sure that this variable here, after I've loaded up my data, is going to track the highest ID in there. Okay, cool. So get one, I get the ID, and then I want to just return the one that has that ID. So I can just use the find function. So this dot to-dos dot find, or this dot data dot to-dos dot find, and we'll just take for each to-do that's in the array, what I want to do is find the one whose to-do.id equals this dot high ID. Okay, so I'm finding that specific one. And then it's going to give it back to me, and then I can work with it. Now, are there probably more efficient ways? I mean, you know, for like, let's say 100, 200, 300 items, this is fine. Now, if I was dealing with thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of items, I probably would need to develop a much more sophisticated search algorithm. or find better ways to manage the data internally instead of just a straight up array. But this will work for our purposes today. So I have the ability to read, get all, get one. Okay, and let's see here. Get one, then I'm going to want to be able to create. Okay. And we're going to pass the new to-do in. And then we're going to add an ID property to the new to-do. So we're going to say, hey, a new to-do dot ID equals, and actually first we'll add one to the ID. So this dot high ID plus plus, we'll just add one to that. And then this becomes equivalent to this dot high ID. Okay, and then we pass in the, we're going to pass that in into the array. So we're going to say, hey, this dot data dot to-dos push the new to-do. Okay. Cool. And then we want to be able to update. So for the update, we would take the ID and then the updated to-do. Okay. And then essentially what we would do is take the updated to-do.id and make it equal the ID. So that way we'll make sure we're pointing to the right to-do. Then we have to find out the index of that to-do in the array, because it's not always the same as the ID, because I might have subtracted things from the array and whatnot. So the fifth item might be the first item, kind of thing. So what I want to do is use the find index function to get the index. So const index equals, another thing I want to do is that every time I update the array of to-dos, what I'd like to do is do the write data function. Okay, basically I want to update that file right after. Const index is going to be this.data.todos dot find index, and what I'm going to want to do is find find the index of the one who's to do, who's to-do.id equals the ID that was passed in. Okay, so that'll give me the right index, and then I can just go update it. So this.data.todos, and as the index, I pass the index in that variable, and we're going to say that's going to equal the updated to-do, and then we're going to write data. Okay, update that. Okay, so you see how that write data saves me the trouble of having to write that over and over again. Okay, so that's generally what you'd want to do when you see that you repeat logic over more than once. So far, so good. I haven't really repeated any particular logic more than once. Okay, and then destroy. Okay, we'll call it delete. Keep it straightforward. Okay, and this way we just specify an ID. We don't need to have an update object. So in that case, what we would do is, once again, we have to find the index. Okay, so in this case, now I'm about to do this twice. So in this case, this might be something I would want to do as a function. So what I'll do is I'll just create another little quick function. Get to do index that takes in an ID. Okay, and then I can just replace this in here. Actually, I just take this, Control X, and return that. So this way, instead of me writing this part twice, I can just be get to do index ID. Okay. And now I can just pull that over here. Okay, and I saved myself a little bit of writing there. And then this time what I can do is I can then splice out the element. So I would just say this dot to do data dot to do's dot splice. And what I want to splice is what's starting at the index, one item. That's going to update the array. But then I want to make sure I update the file, this dot write data. Okay. And there we have all the functions to CRUD. Okay, I have all the functions I need to CRUD, to-dos. The only thing that's missing is like schema enforcement, so I'm not actually double checking that every to-do has all the properties I need. So in this case, it's up to me and my application logic to enforce schemas, but that's fine. And then I'm going to export this. Module.exports equals to-do. Okay, so there's my data model, my object that I'm going to use to work with my data. Okay. And now I can just go build the app. Okay, so I head over to my server.js. Most of this stuff is already set up. I'm just going to use the root router. Actually, no, we'll create a to-do router. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to the controllers, new file, to-do.js. So we're going to have our controllers, model MVC. MVC, you know me. Okay, so I'll just copy the details from the sample router, because that's what it's there for. And I'm just going to get rid of that. And let me just make sure what I need to change here. Nope. We'll come back to that. Okay, actually in my views folder, I'll create a folder for my to-do logic. New file. No, new folder. That's what I wanted. New folder. To-do. Okay. Awesome. And let's see here. Anything else I want to do here? Change that to to-do. And we'll create all those. Might as well just create the new file here. Index.ejs. That'll be my view. So again, that root route. So basically I'm just leaning into that template that already exists there and just making a branch of it for my to-do. So I'm going to just copy this HTML here from my sample folder, post that in here. Okay, and the cool thing is that already includes this head.ejs, which means this in there, I have a app and CSS file that are already good to go. So long as I make sure that each of my HTML pages has this included in it, I'm good to go, although I should get rid of that parentheses there. That's extra. Okay. So maybe I should probably fix it over here too. Good. Okay. And let me just think if there's anything else I need to immediately do. Let me just register that router. So I'm going to go over here, import the router, const to do router equals require dot slash controllers slash to do.js. And then we register that router as middleware, which is down here. App.use for slash to do. And we're going to use the to do router. Okay, so then all the logic is going to be in our to do router going forward. None of this really needs to be touched. And cool. Okay, so let's actually run the server. Let's get developing. So now let's double check that I can get to localhost 3000 slash to do. Good, perfect. Okay, so that's loading up the index page, and just to make it more clear here, let's start editing that page. That's here the index EJS in to do. Okay, so we're going to say, hey, our to-do app. Okay, and we don't really care about this main page link. We're eventually going to want to show all our to-dos here, but there aren't any to-dos yet. So probably the first thing we want to do is create a button to create to-dos. Okay, and that button should link to a href equals slash to do slash new. So that'll link to there. So that way we can create a page that'll let us create a new to do. Okay, and if I refresh this page, There we go. That looks right. Again, the styling could be better, but not going to bother with that right now. Okay, but what we've just done is we've set up the link to the new page, but the new page doesn't exist yet, following, the RESTful routes. So I got to go build that out. So I head that over to my router. That's going to be in my controllers. So I head over to the to-do router, and I'm going to write another route. So again, this is essentially going to be my index route. So I'm going to relabel this. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to now make the new route. Okay, which is again going to be going to /todo/new. This is /todo. Let me just change the comments so that way this is all documented nice and good. App or router.get /new, because again I don't have to write the /todo because that's already covered by this line here. When I registered it with the router, I already said, hey, all the routes in this router have to do with these /todo URLs. So that means in the router, I don't have to replicate that. I don't have to repeat myself. Okay, so again, we're really minimizing that repetition. We're really embracing dry. Do not repeat yourself. Okay. And okay, so then now in here, what I need to do is I need to respond, but that needs to be a function. So let me actually rewrite that. Rec res. Okay, and what I'm going to want to do here is just basically render a template. So res.render todo/new.ejs. Okay, and that should be it for that. So now I just have to make that file. New file, new.ejs. I'm just going to copy over my index.ejs for the HTML. And then we'll say create new to do. And now we need to actually agree on the schema. Create new to do. Okay, and how do I want to do that? Well, this button should just probably take me back to the main page. Back to main. And that'll just take us back to /todo, the main page for our to-do section. So now I'm just going to want to create a form. That form should submit to, that's going to be the action property, and that should submit to /todo, but the method should be post. So we're going to make a post request to /todo. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, I'll use a label. Okay, and then that label, this is going to be the what, we'll call it. Okay, and that'll be an input. The type equals text. And we're going to say type, or I mean a name to do. Oh no, name is a what. Okay, and then we'll do a placeholder just so that way there's something there that kind of tell users what they need to put in there. What to do. And then that'll be that. Okay. Then I'm going to have another input. So just to make this easier, I'll just copy and paste that first input. The second one will be, well, actually you don't need a what for that because it shouldn't be completed on the onset. So you just need to know what to do. So then we just need a submit button. What to do. Or create to do. There we go. And then that should do the job. Okay, so when you click on a button that's inside of a form tag, that's the equivalent of a submit. So that'll basically trigger this request right here. Okay, so now if I click on this button to render the new page, I get the form. Now if I said, hey, cheese is what I want to do, nothing happens because I haven't created the next route, which is the create route, the posting to do. So I got to do that next. So I'm going to head back to my controller back to to-do to go write the route. So next is my create route. Okay, so, and again, create route is generally going to be a post to / to do. Okay, so it's going to be router.get / so I don't have to specify / to do because that's already done by the router when I registered the router in server.js. And then we do rec res. Okay, res.render. No, we're not rendering. And it's not a get, it's a post. You can tell it's early on a Sunday morning. Okay. Res.render. So in this, what I want to do is I want to take the data from the form. So I want to go grab the body. So I'm going to go get the body. So const body equals rec.body. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is just create a to-do. Pass that to the to-do making thing. Okay. But I need to import that to-do model. So I have to go over here, import that, const to-do uppercase, my model, equals require dot slash models slash to-do.js. And that's going to import that whole like class we made. And I'm going to want to instantiate that class. Okay, so I'm going to actually say to-do model. We'll save it as to-do model, the variable name, and then what I want to do is say const to-do equals a new to-do model. Okay, and essentially this to-do model is that class we created in the other file, which is then going to create the JSON file, do all that stuff when it initializes, which might have already done. No, not yet. We haven't used it yet. To-do new model. Oh, there's some, what's here? Oh, because I didn't finish this function over here. Let me just think here. Node fs. Oh, okay. It needs another argument over here in to do. Okay, write file. Oh, I see why, because this should be write file sync. See, if it's not write file sync, then what's going to happen is that it requires an additional callback to run after it's done doing the thing. So nothing here needs to be asynchronous. So I'm going to use the synchronous version of all these functions. So anytime I use write file, I want to use write file sync. I think that was it. Okay, good. We're now in action. And cool. Okay, first off, I already see one little concern. I don't see a to-do JSON that got created in here. Where did it get created? Oh, it got created over here. Interesting. So it's doing it in the context of the application, not of that individual file. So I may want to change that, but that's fine. But you see, it created our data. So there's our data. Just an array of to-dos. Again, changing the location isn't too difficult. I can actually make it where you can customize the location. We'll maybe come back and do that at the end. But let's go back to our controller, where I now have the to-do model, and we basically this imported that model. This allowed me to create that model, and now it exists, and that's why you see the to-do.json now, because it got created and it noticed that there wasn't one, so it made one, because that was the logic we wrote earlier. So okay, back to our create route, rec.body. Now I can use that to-do model and I can use that create function we created earlier, pass it the body. That should basically create the to-do and update the data file. And then we can res.redirect back to the main page. Okay. So let's see here. So now if I type in create to-do, it took me back to the main page. Not exactly what I intended. I really want to go back to the main to-do page / to-do. So let me fix that. But right now I see nothing here. But do I see it in my to-do.json? Do I see the update? And yeah, you see like it created a new to-do. Okay. Nice. So in that case, so far, so good. Okay, our create function does exactly what it's supposed to do. It added the to-do, and it put it into the JSON file. Okay, let me go back to /to-do. Let me create a few to-dos. Okay, eat breakfast. And you see it added it right there. Eat lunch. Okay, so far so good. Okay. And again, I can always just save this here. VS Code will automatically format that JSON, so you can kind of see it more clearly in action. Okay, so eat lunch is typoed, but whatever, not a big deal. Okay, but the only problem is on this index page, I'm not seeing my to-dos. So what's up with that? Well, it's because our index.EJS, 1, doesn't receive the to-dos, and 2, our template doesn't render the to-dos. So we're going to have to go back to our controllers, back to our to-do controller, and we're going to update the index route so that we can give it the to-dos. So I'm going to say const to-dos equals to-do.getAll. That's why we wrote that getAll function. That's going to go fetch all the to-dos, so that way I only get that array of to-dos. And then I'm going to go pass that to the template, to-dos, and say, okay, when you render index.EJS, make sure you use the to-dos. And now I can use it over here. And we'll say, we're going to create a main element. And then in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a loop. So I'm going to say use EJS, and I'm going to use a for each loop. It's just more natural for me. So that'll be to-dos dot for each, and that's going to get a callback in there. Okay, and that's going to take the to-do, and then there. So now I'm going to make sure I branch off my EJS to make sure that the actual loop here is all enclosed in these EJS brackets, because again, I got to be in JavaScript mode, which is what these brackets do. And then in the middle, I can write the HTML that I want written on each loop. So I can say, hey, for each loop, what I would like is a div with the class of to-do, because it represents an individual to-do. And in each to-do, I'm going to want an h3 that is just the to-do.id. Oh no, to-do.what is the property. Okay. Then I want it to be able to, really there's no like need to update it. So I don't need like an update form, because usually with the to-do, you just click it and it updates. So really all I need here is a button. So, well, we'll just do them as forms. So we're going to have one form that does an action to update. So I'm just use the update route for that. Slash to-do /ID. But again, we're going to use method override to make sure it's a put. Method equals put. So typically you would use an edit form and you'd have an edit route, but I'm not going to need it because the update is always the same. You're either completing it or incompleting it. I'm not going to do a thing where you can change the text. You can either just delete that to do and then change it, re-add it or whatnot. That's just the way I'm designing this user experience. Just a decision I made because I'm the developer and I can make those decisions. Okay, so again, it's going to override it as a put. And again, I still got to make sure method here says post because just reasons. Okay, because if not, it's going to default to a GET request, and I don't want that. And then this is just going to be a button. Okay, saying complete to do. Completed. And honestly, this doesn't need to say ID like that. It needs to actually have the actual ID. So I need to inject the ID here. So it'd be to-do.id. Okay. Cool. And then what I'm going to do is with this h3, it may have a class. Okay, maybe not. It just depends. So what we'll do is we'll do this. If, or we're going to just do a ternary operator. So we'll say, hey, if to do dot completed, so that means if that property is truthy, which should only be if you click the completed button, so question mark, then I wanted to have a class of completed. Otherwise, what I want is it to have nothing. Okay. Honestly, I probably should use... Well, I need to complete the EJS. And that should be fine. Yeah. That's parsing fine. Because then basically this gets treated as JavaScript. Okay, this kind of escapes it and says, hey, no, we're in EJS now. This gets treated as JavaScript. And this is the end of the EJS, so then I don't think I should run into an issue with the double quotes, the overuse of double quotes. If I want to really be safe, I could switch one set or the other to single quotes, but we'll see. We'll see how it works. Oh, wait, this is like off color, so I'm going to think that maybe I do need to change that. So I'm going to do this. Go back, and then change those to, nope, not backticks, single quotes. Okay. So I'm going to assume that off coloration is just from not the greatest syntax highlighting. Okay. Cool. Although this should be two double quotes, single quotes there. Okay, yep. And then this angle bracket here is extra. So that's probably an issue. Oh, I see. This angle bracket belongs over here. That's the issue. Get rid of that closing H3. Okay, now we're good. Because see, this closes that. And then we put the what the to-do is here. The reason is it's going to be when it has this completed class, I want it to have like a line through it. Okay, cool. So that should be good. Let me just save it so that way it just makes that a little bit easier to read. Okay, perfect. So feel free to pause the video if you want to kind of just like look at this code and take it in before I move forward. But now I'm going to move forward. Okay, so we have the form. And honestly, we might as well just make the delete button while we're here too. So I'm just going to, it's literally going to be the same thing, except it's going to say delete. And instead of a put, it's going to be delete. Okay. And that should do it for me. So now if I refresh this, see now the different to-dos show up. Wonderful. Okay, but the problem is now if I click completed or delete, it's going to, well, it's going to break because those routes aren't made yet. So I should probably make those routes. I'm not going to create a show route because honestly, there's no need to show an individual to-do. There's not much detail to it. If there's something more detailed like a product, then I would probably want a show page. But as a to-do list, it's really just a list where I check things off. So we'll leave it at that. So I just need to kind of complete these delete and update routes. Okay, and then the update route is really going to be more kind of custom because I'm not just, again, I'm not giving you a form to update a bunch of different properties. It's just a clear update. You're making it completed, and that's it. Okay. Cool. Now, so the update route, again, that's going to be a put to /to-do. Router dot put. That's going to be the /to-do. Oh, no, don't need to do that. Just /id. Because, again, the to-do is implied by the router. Rec res. Okay. And Yep. Essentially all I'm doing is, let me think about this. So yeah, I'm gonna go get the item. So const the to do equals to do dot get one. That'll just go get me that individual to do with the ID, but I need to put the ID in its own variable. So I'm gonna do that. Const ID equals rec.params.id, because rec.params is generally where params are stored, and I have an ID param in my URL. So I'm gonna go grab the ID from the URL. Then I'm gonna say, hey, go get me that one. Okay, and then to do dot get one. The idea is that this to do should have now a completed property that equals true. And then we'll say to do dot update. Okay, and then we'll pass in the ID, and we'll pass in the updated to do. Okay, and then we'll res.redirect back to the main page / to do. Okay. Cool. Right now, I won't be able to tell it's completed because the only thing I've done to mark it's complete is that class, which doesn't do anything yet. So I should probably take care of that first, so that way we know if it actually worked. Okay. I mean, I could do this. I could hit completed on, well, let me refresh. I'm going to hit completed on EJS. Get to do index is not defined. Okay, so we need to go back to our to do model. I made a mistake somewhere. Get to do index, and that's going to be in the update. Oh, okay, so here's why. This should be this dot get to do index, which means this is going to have the same problem. This dot get to do index. Okay, that's fixed. Because again, get to do index was another method of the class, so I have to make sure I say this dot. Okay, so I hit completed. So that worked. Now, only way I can confirm it right now is by looking at the data. So if I go to todo.json, the EJS to do should show up as completed. So, yep, there it is. EJS is showing up as completed. Oh, and I see why. Okay. Notice what's happening. There's multiple of these that have the ID of 1. Now, why would that be the case? Okay, that's telling me that something's happening. So every time this app restarts. So if let's try creating another to do, blah 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 blah. What ID do I get? I'm getting ID 4. That works fine. So let me start this over again. So I'm gonna bop data. Okay, I'm gonna restart the app. Oops, did not mean to do that. Control F. Or I think it's FG. Okay, and then I want to kill the server, which would be Control C. Before I accidentally sent it to the background, I had to get it back to the foreground. Okay. So I'm going to restart the app, npm run dev. And now if I refresh this page, there's no to-dos. Now let's just try this out. If I create the first to-do, ID 1. If I create another to-do, ID 2. If I create a third to-do, ID 3. Okay, so that's all working. So now if I were to mark the right, so there must have been some weird take-up from before. But actually, I think I have an idea. Let's try this. If I stop the server again, and then I restart it again, and then I make a new to-do, let's see what happens. Okay, good. It is working. Okay. So there must have been just some weird take-up from before. Okay. So now let's see what happens if I complete one. Okay. Okay, so here's where we notice something kind of funny. Okay, so the problem is in the update, because look what happened. It was updated with the ID of 1. So let me see. Let's go back to the logic of our to-do model, see what's going on there when we update. Okay. Updated to do. We get the ID from the deal. Actually, let me go back and take a look at my index at EJS. To do.id. Yeah, that should be the ID number. So, oh, but you see, like, it's getting to do ID number 1. Yes. Which is fine. But it's still updating the last one. Das does. So, like, if I complete this one, cannot set properties of undefined. Let me think about that. Completed. So now the object's just completely undefined, which it shouldn't be because we have one with the ID of 3 right there. Okay, so there's something wrong with the logic in the model. Okay, so let's think about this. We're going to receive the ID. So let me just make sure that I'm receiving the ID here in the server, or I mean in the router. So when we do the update, we are doing to-do.update. We are passing the ID, and the ID is coming from over here, which we got from params. So that should work. And so let's do two things. Let's console log the ID and the to-do. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it as an object. ID to-dos, just so that way it looks a little bit nicer. Okay, so now let's see what happens when I click on this. ID 1. Okay, now if I click on ID 3, 2, but it's still giving me back the one with the ID of 1. Okay, so there's something wrong with that find statement. So the problem is get one. Get one is what's not working then. Because get one is what's getting us that to do, and it's not getting us the right to do. So I need to go see what's going on with get one. This.todo.id, this.high ID. Oh. Yeah, no, this should be ID. That's the problem there. Okay. There we go. We fixed that. So now let's try it out again. Let's see if I click on this one. Cannot set properties of undefined. Let's take a look at the console log though. It did not find the one with the ID of 3. And again, this is showing up as a string, so maybe that is the problem. So what I want to do is I want to make sure I parse the ID that comes in as an int. Oh, Control C. We'll just actually use the parse int function. That will turn the string into a number, just to make sure that it is treated as a number. Okay, so let me click on this one again. Okay, so that time I got the right one. Good. And let me take a look at what we see here. 2. Okay, and then, so this time it updated it, but this one is still kind of marked wrong. So I'm going to reset this again. Okay, and I am going to restart the server. I think we got it fixed, but okay. Good, so now let's try making a few to-dos. Refresh the page, no to-dos. Hello. Is it me? You're looking for Okay, so let's try this. So I'm going to complete this third ID And yeah, that worked. Okay, so it looks like we're back in action. Okay, good. So now that we have that, and again, the cool thing about having the JSON file is I can refer to the JSON file to see that these updates actually worked. I can so that turns me to a couple things, that it's updating it and that it's perfectly writing it to the file. Okay, so everything is looking good so far. So now we're going to go to that CSS file. Okay, CSS, where is it? In the public folder. And I'm going to target that class of completed. And essentially all I want is like text decoration. I want a line through. Okay. So now when I refresh the page, see if it is completed, it says you line through. But the problem is you can still click completed. So I don't really quite like that. So I may want to edit that as well. So I'm going to head back to our EJS. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that ternary operator over here, because I'm essentially going to do the same thing, but instead I'm going to do it with the completed button. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the disabled, basically I'm going to write the word disabled in there, which should disable the button if it's already been completed. So if I click refresh, and see now when it's completed, I can't click the completed button anymore because, well, it's been completed. So if I click this one, and see now that one's been completed as well. Okay, nice. Okay, so now let's just do that delete button, and then we kind of got a working to-do list. So that's going to be back to our routers, which is this one in our controllers folder. The delete route, which is a delete to/to-do/id, which is the same thing up here, so I should probably update that, /id. And that's just going to be router.delete /id. And that's just going to be rec res. Okay. And in this case, I should just do to-do.delete. And we can just pass in the ID, rec.params.id. So I'll skip the step of saving it into a separate variable. And then once you delete it, it's just res.redirect back to /to-do. Easy. Okay, now we got some errors. Let's see why. Duplicate parameter name not allowed in this context. Oh, I wrote rec, not rec res. There we go. Okay, so one thing I do want to check though is I'm going to check my model. I'm going to go back to our delete function, get to do index. I'm probably going to want to get to do index. I think we fixed that already. Yep. First int was on get one. I'm still just to be safe, I'm going to make sure that ID is parsed as an int here. Just because we saw how it was kind of an issue before. I want to make sure that no issue going forward. Okay, we're going to hit save. And now I should be able to delete these. So like maybe I don't want these completed ones anymore. And that works. Oh, wait, no, I didn't delete that did not delete the right one. Okay, let me try this again. If I try to do is it me, it deleted you are. Okay, so we are not deleting the right one. So let's examine what we're getting back. Okay. So here in the delete function, let's examine console.log ID index. I want to see if I'm getting what I should be getting. Because if I hit get to do index, it should be find index of the to do ID that matches the ID that was passed in. Yes. Okay, so let's see what happens. So if I refresh, oh, nothing got deleted. Okay, so that's also interesting. So, or at least it didn't get deleted in the file. Oh, I didn't invoke write data, so it never updated the file there. So that was missing a parentheses. But let's see here. If I hit delete on is it me? Ah, okay. So you see it's getting a -1. So that means that this get to do index isn't working. So I did change the parse in. So let me take off the parse in, see if that fixes it. Okay, so let's try this again. So this should be that worked. Now let's see here. If I do UR, I should get index 1 again. That's interesting. It all kind of cleared out. Not what I expected. Eat lunch. Okay, yep. So we're getting some weird behavior. Okay, so if I delete lunch, I should get ID 4, but an index of -1. That's not correct. Because we deleted it. But okay, now if I click UR, let's see what happens if I delete it. That found it. And if I delete hello, still got the -1. That's interesting. Now if I take a look at the 2.json, it is emptied out. So it did successfully delete them, but still doesn't feel right. Okay, so let's just do 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'm going to take a look here. This should be 4, but I should get an index of 3. So the idea is I should get an ID of 8. And let's see here. I get an index of -1, but it was removed. But why am I getting an index? Now, if I do this one, delete 2, I should get index of 1. And no, I get an index -1, and then deleted 3 instead. So something is still not right with that logic. So let's see here, because this should be returning this dot get to do index, return dot this to do's dot find index. It iterates through each to do, double checks whether the to do ID equals the ID that was passed in. So that makes me think it's the parse in situation. So let's actually just console log the ID in here. So we see the ID by itself. That's get to do index. And again, let me just add a few more to do's. So we'll add 3 and 4 again. Okay, and then if I delete number 3, okay, so this console is not a function because it's not. It's console.log. Oy. Okay, let's go back. Refresh. Let's delete number 3. Okay, so it did find ID there, but again, not returning the index. Create to do. 4 again. Okay, and now if I make this parse int again, or let's say I use the number construct parse int. Okay, let's see here. Refresh. Let's delete number 3. That time it worked. Okay, so this time the parse int is working. Let's delete number 4. That worked. Okay, I think, yeah, that fixed it. So the parse int was a parse int problem. I must have done something weird before. Okay, so now it looks like we have full CRUD. So I should be able to create a to-do. Eat breakfast. Okay, I can see my to-do, so I can read. I can update the to-do, make it completed, and I can delete it. And the cool thing is, if I were to shut down my app, it would still load up the data because all the data is here stored in the to-dos, in this to-dos.json. Okay, so I'm using JSON as my persisted data store. How cool is that? This would be great if you're running your own server. Not great if you're using something like Render or Heroku, where they're using stateless deployments. Because what would happen is that it every once in a while it's going to reset your app to the state of your latest Git commit. So in that case, your to-do file exists would be your JSON file here would have to exist somewhere separately. Okay, so you would have to write to some remote file separate from your deployment for this to work, which is you can do, but more tricky and more asynchronous. But the idea is that like if you ran your own server, so it wasn't so you could have a stateful server, so you can actually have the files change on your server. Um, as the application runs, this is not a bad way to store data. Again, you could always store it to remote JSON files. So essentially, you probably would have like a separate. You might use like some sort of function to write the file to like S3 or something. But it is what it is. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to overcomplicate it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Have a great day and enjoy.